If you've got a voice, then pull up a seat. Real talk drops with every beat. No echo chamber, no disguise. Welcome to the Dead Mike Society.
This is Dan. Welcome to Dead Mike Society. We actually have a special co-host today. We have Nate visiting in on the show. I've known Nate a long time. Welcome to the show, Nate. How's it going, man?
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Man, it has just been a crazy summer. There's been a lot of heat. There's been crazy politics. I know that you reside in California. What do you think of the summer? Like, what do you think's going on with all this stuff?
Where do you want to start? The heat or the politics?
Well, let's start with the heat.
I mean, I mean, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I heard that there's a big El Nino this year,
Uh,
and that may be contributing to excessive heat, out of the ordinary. But it also may lead to more rains.
right, right. And with rains comes mudslides in California. Does any of that ever affect you or the areas near you? Like, I know, like, for example, I live near Malibu, and when it rains, man, it is just like a nightmare on PCH. I mean, other than having all those fires in Pacific Palisades, Malibu, and so on, it's just been a crazy chain of events.
Well, yeah, I mean, part of the problem is that every time there's a fire, like on one of those hillsides, like in Malibu or up in Santa Barbara, um, it burns away a lot of the trees and the shrubs,
Hmm.
and those plants actually provide um, a lot of traction for the dirt. And so then what ends up happening is that when you get these heavy torrential rains, there's nothing to hold the dirt or the mud. And then you get these terrible mudslides that can cause significant damage or even loss of life. So one thing can actually lead to the other. So it's kind of an ongoing problem between the fires and the mudslides.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I saw up near the Getty, kind of off of the 405 freeway, it seemed like they were putting some kind of almost like a chain inside of the mountainside. It was like almost like they were chaining it with something. And I saw they had built like a big retaining wall off of the freeway. So I'm not sure if they're trying to give more support from the moving hill, but
You might be onto something, but yeah, I know they do a lot of that. They do a lot of netting for preventing erosion, and then they do nets sometimes for giant boulders or rock slides.
mhm.
But yeah, constant erosion is a thing. So if you have a house on a hill near a hillside or a cliff, you've got to worry about erosion. And also part of the problem is that if you clear out all those brush, because they say, oh, cut the trees, cut the brush,
Right.
because you don't want to have a terrible fire, because that was part of the problem is that if you have too much overgrowth or underbrush, the fire spreads really quickly. Well, now if you cut all that out, now you actually have less roots in the soil, and less plants could mean you know less friction to stop the erosion.
Right.
So
And do you think some of this, like the issues might be inside of the government infrastructure? I mean, I know during the Palisades fire, a lot of people were blaming Karen Bass specifically for not putting water into the levees and not following the fire department's kind of like their votes. I guess they wanted certain things, and from my understanding, she just didn't do it for one reason or another, that there wasn't money in the budget. So, do you think maybe part of the reason that California has this issue, especially in El Nino years, is because of the government of California, between the governor and the mayor? I mean, what are we looking at here?
Well, no, absolutely. You're definitely onto something. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, is that ultimately this is the government's responsibility, the mayor's responsibility. the whole point of having an elected office or, public service is to look out for the community and the common good. And it's not just about thinking about day to day or week to week, but sometimes you have to think about, decade to decade, or, even if it's like a once in 100 year fire or once in 100 year flood, it's going to happen every 100 years. You still have to be prepared for that. So, it's a huge failure if there's no plans in place for that. Sometimes what happens is something hasn't happened in such a long time that there's like institutional memory uh, that's lost when certain members retire or certain departments, change leadership. And so, it's very important that not only are we planning for today, but we also have to plan for tomorrow or even 10 or 20 years down the road. And that's where I think we're starting to fail.
Well, yeah, I mean, who is really going to be the leader of tomorrow? I mean, what are we dealing with right now? It seems like the schools indoctrinate this learning system that isn't making like the cream of the crop per se. It seems like it's making a lot of entitled people, a lot of lazy people, and people that don't really have a lot of self-confidence. And when I think of a leader, I think of someone who can demonstrate these qualities that most people don't have, these outgoing personalities, and like you said, this ability to think forward and to make these bigger plans. Do you think the way that we're raising these Angelinos, you know what I mean, of the future, do you really think that this is going to work out for California, or are we turning into just a nightmare state? Even though, how do you mess up California? I mean, you got the mountains, you got the ocean, you got the perfect weather, you have the cannabis industry, you have the casino industry. I mean, how do you mess it up?
Yeah, no, you bring up so many good points. And you might have to help me circle back to answer it all, but
Yeah.
um, ultimately, I think it starts with leadership. If you have a leadership that's sending mixed messages or mixed signals or kind of everything's okay or hunky dory or whatever, that's the results you're going to get. If we don't have a clear direction, whether it's right or wrong, and then, you can argue one way or the other. But if you don't have a clear direction of like, this is, how we want people to act, this is how we want to, raise our children. These are the values we want to instill into our kids. What's important, being good at reading and math and science. If you don't instill that from the top down, I mean, this is what you're going to get. The UC system, they abolished the SATs,
Mhm.
and now they're saying they got to bring it back because people can't do basic math. And then part of the problem also is, who are kids looking up to now? They're not looking up to astronauts and doctors and engineers. They want to be YouTube stars. I mean, if that's who they're looking up to, that's what you're going to get. And YouTube stars, they're not showing off how smart they are, their vocabulary, or how great they are at science and math. No, they're usually doing silly stunts, and they're being a little selfish and self-serving and whatnot. And that's what you're getting. You're getting selfish kids. So it's a huge problem, But again, it all starts with leadership. We don't have to agree, but we just have to have a mission, a goal, something we can all get behind. Like I can agree or disagree with, Elon Musk wanting to go to Mars, but at least he's got a goal. He's got a plan, a vision. It's like, let's all get behind this. It might be silly, it might be crazy. Yeah, we can't live on Mars. There's no air or easily accessible water, and it's like pretty hard to get to. But you know what? If we don't set goals, we're not going to accomplish anything.
Right.
So when everything's confused, nothing is going to get done. And now we're seeing, we reap what we sow. And this is the problem. But yeah, California used to be the golden state. It was the best state in the whole country. And now, you could argue maybe it's Texas. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of other states that, are starting to look better than California in many ways, other than maybe the weather.
Right. And so are you thinking maybe if there was a political change, I know that would be hard for California, um, because it's kind of been set in its ways, and I'm not sure how that happened. I know that it was kind of a more laid back culture with Hollywood. So California with the beaches and whatnot, it kind of seemed like people didn't want to be as front and forward with their political affiliation. Maybe it wasn't popular for movies, like movie studios and radio, so they wanted to kind of stick to their guns and just kind of let it develop in this very liberal sense, or do you think that that came later down the road, like kind of near, um, I know we had Clinton in office for a while, and it seemed like at that time California was probably at one of its highest peaks, in that like kind of mid 90s. But do you think it changed, you know what I mean? Or did it, like, when do you think the shift occurred? Or has it always kind of been shifted as more of a liberal place?
Well, I grew up in Northern California, so I don't know exactly how Southern California was, you know, many years ago, but I visited from time to time. And I definitely agree. I think there has been a shift, but I think part of the problem, I think the biggest problem is, kind of cancel culture. And because if you can't share your opinion because it might be different than someone else's opinion, then how can we ever work problems out? So I think part of the problem is that when there are issues or are differences, and things are shifting, if there's if the a certain side or a minority side, I don't know whatever it is, whether it's a majority or minority, but even if are a majority, but if the majority is getting canceled or their opinion isn't getting listened to or it's immediately disregarded, how can you have any sort of constructive um, change or progress that where we can work together? And then you start getting these divisions, and then it's like us or them, and then if the people who are canceling can control, maintain power and only give power to other people that think and feel the same way as them,
Mhm.
then you're only going to get one type of idea, essentially, whether it's a good idea or bad idea necessarily. But I think whether it's good or not, it's always worth talking about or discussing. It's By the end of the day, hopefully that's why we elect leaders that are hopefully smart, intelligent, and they hopefully will make the best decision for everyone, even if it's a difficult decision, even if it's unpopular. They're
Mhm.
supposed to make good decisions for their constituents, not what happens to be the flavor of the week or what's popular right now to win points. Ultimately, that's what they should do. But unfortunately, because people want to get reelected or they want, popularity points, they'll do things that aren't in the best interest of everyone uh, that they're representing.
Right. And do you think that it's kind of almost like a popularity contest now because of how, with this cancel culture, it's almost like they make themselves like popular by following this regiment. And if someone gets out of line, it's almost like they can ruin their career. They can ruin how society looks at them. And do you think like it's almost like bullying? You know what I mean? To a certain extent. Would you agree with that? Like maybe it's kind of like bullying, this cancel culture, where we've gotten with it at least.
I mean, yeah, I definitely can feel that way at times, and if people are losing their job because they have a different opinion, or at least afraid to speak out, that can be bullying sometimes. But at the same time, people should have a right to say they want that what they want to say. And again, in America's freedom of speech, but if what you say could hurt your employer's business, then they could still have the right to potentially fire you. So yeah, I don't know. It's tough to give you like
Mhm.
a one size fits all, but
Right.
the bottom line is, we people need to be able to have constructive dialogue. And it's not healthy if, a certain group of people, whoever it may be, take the I'm right, you're wrong, period, and there's no sort of discussion back and forth, like let's talk about it and then let me, we'll each have an argument, and then we can break down the argument and try to figure out, who is the better talking points, and what makes the most sense, and what's logical, and then go from there. And that's the way it should be.
So if you were the governor, like let's say there was no more Newsom, right? Do you think would there be a plan that you would put in place, or is there an ideology that you think that the next leader could follow? And then to follow up, also, do you think the mail-in ballots might be corrupt? Like maybe that's also kind of what's ruining the integrity of the California elections.
Yeah, really good questions. So yeah, to start, um, okay. Well, first of all, I think with the mail-in ballots, I think those can be fine as long as there's a way to verify whoever is sending the mail-in ballot. Counting them after the election over starts getting a little bit sticky. And the fact that people in California, it's actually illegal to show your ID or ask your ID,
Mhm.
then it raises a lot of questions of are these legitimate, and how can you actually double check or fact check that these are who it is? So I think personally, people should show their ID to vote, just because it would instill a lot of confidence in the elections, and that we wouldn't have to second guess, or whether it not, changes anything or not. At least people would have confidence in the system, and why wouldn't you want that? So that I absolutely can support. And I don't buy the idea that, oh, like people can't get an ID, or they don't get an ID. I mean, come on. Like, you need an ID for literally anything. Go to the bank, you want to buy alcohol at the grocery store, you want to
Right.
rent a car, you want to go to the airport, you know, you want to get in the nightclub, I mean, literally anything, you need an ID. You get, you get your insurance, you go to the doctor, you got to show your insurance and your ID. I mean, I don't know, like literally everyone has an ID, or can get one, or knows how to get one. And if you can't, and you don't know how to, maybe those people honestly shouldn't be voting. So I don't know. Now, the other part is, yeah, if I were governor today, the first thing I would do, is I would try to inspire the state to work together towards common goals. Whether you're right, left, middle, whatever, purple with polka dots, I would say let's work together to get something done. If we want to get a high-speed rail done, let's get a high-speed rail done. But let's not let's actually do it. Let's not say we're going to do it and then do it half-ass and take 20 years and spend all this money. It's like, let's actually do it. We have to do it, and we have to, cut away all the regulations to make it happen. Then let's make it happen. But don't say, well, we're going to do this, it's going to be so great, and then spend all this money and waste time and money on it, and then it feels it's disingenuous. But for example, I recently visited Japan,
Mhm.
and again, of course, Japan is different than America, but I was so amazed and inspired, actually, just by the Japanese people and the Japanese culture. And one thing that really struck me was just how polite everyone is, just in the day-to-day conversation. They might, like, deep down inside, might not want to be polite, and they might not want to um, be so respectful all the time, but they do it because it's expected. It's part of their culture. It's part of, if you don't do it, you're like, stepping out of line, or you're like the weirdo. But who doesn't want to be treated with respect, or who wouldn't want to be talked to politely? So, what I realize is, if they can do it, whether they like it or not, they can do it. It's like, well, we could do something like that too. Like, we could have more respect for our fellow man. We could have more respect for one another. We could be more polite. We could say thank you very much, instead of like, have a good one, or like,
Mhm.
thanks, thanks a bunch or something. You could you we could go a little bit more to, like, just show, respect for others, respect for elders.
Mhm.
Um, so if we could get behind common goals, and again, I'm only referencing that in the sense that their whole society does it, so it's possible, it can be done. You know what I mean? We can make these changes if we all agree to work together to do it. Whether we like it or not, it's expected. So So not only would I want people to, treat each other with more respect, but I would want everyone to be inspired to work together towards common goals. Like let's make, math and science and reading and writing something to aspire towards. Like to be good at these things. Like, hey, let's do this. Like, yeah, let's become an engineer or an astronaut or a doctor.
Mhm.
Um, or maybe an AI expert or whatever, robotics expert. Let's inspire people to want to be great and to achieve great things or to create great art. Or let's work on infrastructure projects together. Let's help build reservoirs above Malibu or whatever, so we have the water we need. Let's work together towards common goals
Mhm.
that we can all get behind, and let's go for it. Instead of like identity politics or things that are divisive. Like no one I don't think is going to argue about like having better infrastructure or better schools or better education or inspiring people to want to be better. So I mean that's what I would do if I were in charge, is I would try to change the culture to like let's be the best we can be. Let's be awesome and let's work together to achieve that.
And I mean, I like that. I think the issue we have right now is the infrastructure of even the minimum wage in California is so outrageous that you're creating this pay gap where minimum wage people are making, let's just give a fake number. I don't know what the real number is. Let's just say it's $25 an hour.
Well, I think it's 1690, but after, taxes and whatnot, payroll taxes, it ends up being, probably closer to $18 an hour. But, for the fast food workers, it's what, like 20 or 22, I think. And then for the healthcare workers, I think it's now like 25. But yeah, go on. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's what I'm saying is whatever the number is, right? Like you said, it's 17 bucks an hour. Well, what happens is companies can't afford to pay the college educated people more who took out student loans and they got an advanced degree. So they're going, look, if you have no degree, you get 17. If you have a degree, we'll give you 20, right? And the people who have a degree, they feel like 20 isn't enough, right? Or whatever it is, if it's 25 and 28. I'm saying that it used to be the minimum wage was a minimum number that people weren't supposed to be able to live on. I mean, that's the reality of it. It was something you would do while you were in school and you were getting your education. You would make seven and a quarter, and then you'd get out of school and you get into a job that you're making 20 or 30 an hour, right? But now that the gap has changed so much, you can't really inflate these other salaries because they aren't so advanced. They're just undergrad degrees. It's not like they have doctoral degrees or master degrees, which then would entitle them to these higher pays. How do we change that? Because we're turning into a state that people don't want to work for. To be honest, people want to work for tips. People want to work for gifts. People would rather do online advertising and get residual income or from sponsorships or endorsements or OnlyFans, right? So how do you really get this new crop of people to want to be an astronaut or want to be a part of the infrastructure like 911, for example, I want to say LA, they are not able to take the calls. So 911 puts you on hold because they don't have the infrastructure. Same thing at the airports. They're running out of controllers that are able to watch it. So they brought in a bunch of gamers to train them because they said, well, gamers, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah,
So they're
I
just
like that.
right. So they're trying to figure out what to do. But as soon as there's a airline catastrophe, which we know will happen at some point, not if it will, then they're going to say, why would you bring in gamers? You know what I mean? It's like, why would you put
Yeah. Well, it's
the
easy to
infrastructure?
point fingers, obviously, after the fact.
Right. So what are we going to do? I mean, like what kind of plan can we put in place? I mean, and now I'm hearing that they want to raise the minimum wage again. I mean, how many times can you raise this thing? And then all the rents go up, the gas goes up, the
Yeah.
cost of goods goes up. And I mean, at a certain point, we're going to be like a foreign country where they're burning $100,000 bills in the street because they're worth nothing.
Yeah. No, you bring up so many good points, and I agree I think, with you in principle on so many levels. And I want to actually want to talk about this at length if you don't mind. But we have to talk about a bunch of different points. So overall, like, I think the goal of raising the minimum wage, at least what the leaders say, is to create a living wage for everyone. Like, that's the goal, right? It's like if we raise the minimum wage high enough, everyone will have a living wage, and then everyone that has a job will no longer be in poverty. I mean, that's what they say. But the reality is, when you raise the minimum wage, it makes, labor cost is usually the highest cost for most employers. So when you raise the wages, it forces the employers to raise their prices for everything or go out of business. No one wants to go out of business, so they have to raise prices. But it doesn't just stop with the minimum wage people, because then the people that are working there for 5 years or 10 years, they go, boss, I've been working for 5 or 10 years. This person who you just hired is making almost as much money as me. That's not fair. Well, then they want a raise, and so on and so forth. And so that basically what you end up getting is you just get immediate rapid inflation. Okay. And so that's what's happening, or you just go out of business. And I think you're seeing that with fast food, because they raised it not just to 16.90, but they raised it to 20 or 22 or whoever, who knows how high it is. And a lot of these fast food places, unless they're In-N-Out Burger and they have their volume so high where, they can kind of make it work with such high volume, a lot of them are going out of business now. Carl's Jr. and Wendy's and Burger King's, they just can't, no one wants to pay $20 for a hamburger,
especially a bad one.
Yeah, right. They go, well, if I'm going to pay that much, I might as well go to a sit-down restaurant now.
And then it's 40.
Yeah, right.
It's like $38,
exactly. Right. But no, I think, what was at least spoken as well intended is having kind of the opposite effects. And part of what you're saying about motivation is, it's almost like socialism in a way, I think, or communism, where they were saying that, I think it was communism, where everyone, no matter whether you're a doctor or farmer or plumber or whatever, you all make the same amount of money, no matter what you do. Right. And it's like, well, if everyone earns the same amount, then why work so hard? Why try? Why don't I just be a YouTuber? Right? Why don't I just start my own podcast and you know what I mean? It's like, why work so hard? Why jump in this rat race? So so by trying to help people, I think you're subconsciously disincentivizing people to try their hardest and work their hardest. You're sending the wrong message that you can get ahead by doing nothing, but that's not how it works. Or at least that's not how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to, if you really didn't like your job at minimum wage, then quit your job, get a new job. Right.
Well, I think Hollywood did this.
Or tell your boss, go, hey, I think I deserve more. If I deserve a raise. If you don't give me a raise, I'll quit. And they're either going to give you a raise or you're going to quit. No big deal, But when you artificially raise a minimum wage like over 100% in like 10 years, what do you think's going to happen?
Well, I think the issue is Hollywood, man. That's what I was trying to say is Hollywood, they're paying the top 1% of actors, 30 million a movie or so. And then the rest
I just read today Tom Holland got 20 million for the latest Spider-Man, plus a huge amount on the back end, and it's probably going to be over 100 million.
Well, that's what they're doing now is a lot of the big actors are reinvesting into the production because these movies cost so much now. I mean, there was a time that you could get away with, $100 million movie. Now these movies are almost $1 billion. So they take the money from the actors. The top actors want to reinvest on the back end and go, well, we know this is going to be the highest grossing movie of all time because ticket prices are the most expensive that they've ever been in all time. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you're comparing, apples to oranges. You know what I mean? It's not the same era. Tickets aren't the same price. So these, Hollywood, I just think it gave this false sense of security to people. They said, well, if these actors can make 30 million a movie, then I can get lucky and I can be an actor on YouTube, or I can be an actor in in this pretend internet world, which is very popular now. I mean, I'm in it myself and Dead Mike Society, but you know what I'm saying is you want to get a piece of it, but it's just like Hollywood where most of the people are making peanuts and the few people on the top are eating all the cake, and it trickles
Yeah.
down, you know? But
Well, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say we are running out of time on the show. And go ahead, leave us with the final thought, please, Nate. It's wonderful having you on the show.
Oh no, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. No, I was going to say I think it's great to have your dreamers. So, you want to have something to aspire to. So even though like not everyone can be a Tom Holland, you want to have someone to look up to. But the last thing I want to touch on the minimum wage is that when you artificially raise the minimum wage, it actually increases both the payroll tax and then the income tax that you would collect in California. So it's actually a way to technically raise taxes without saying you raise taxes. You're saying you're helping people. So,
Mm.
you know, even though they're claiming they're doing it to help people, it may actually sneakily be to just raise revenues or raise taxes for the state so they can pay off, whatever endowments or pensions that they need to pay off that they don't have any money for anymore. So anyway, it could go deep down the rabbit hole. But anyway, that's all I want to say. I think raising minimum wage, I think, is a big mistake. If people really want to make more money, improve your skills or quit and get a different job.
And you said it, man. It might just be a cash grab from the government to try to get even on a lot of those deals that were just horrible for California and for, Los Angeles and the other counties. I want to thank you for being on the show, Nate. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I hope to see you again on the show soon. I appreciate the fans for checking out Dead Mike Society. Please hit the like and subscribe button. You can also go to thedeadmikesociety.com and join the fan club. Well, this is Dan, and it's been a pleasure having you on the show, Nate. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks again. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks, man.
If you've got a voice, then pull up a seat. Real talk drops with every beat. No echo chamber, no disguise. Welcome to the Dead Mike Society.